take all of your rifle markers and place them in a cup. Do the same with all of your special skill markers. Decide how many soldier units you'll be playing with and select from the 4 available. We're just going to be playing with 1 soldier unit today, so we'll take McPherson. There's no difference between any of the soldiers. From the cup, we're going to randomly draw a rifle for Private McPherson. We have drawn a Springfield with a range of 8. Next, we'll draw a special skill for McPherson, and we have Lucky. Let's see if we can focus on that. He can re-roll dice once per turn, must use the second roll. And we'll place that on his drawn skill. Then we'll take an ammo marker for his pistol. It's fully loaded. We'll place it on the 6. Now we'll give the heroic action cards a shuffle. Draw from the top of the deck. Headshot. Destroy an undead unit within your line of sight and range adjacent to any other player or to you if you are the only player in the game. Expend 1 ammo. That will be Private McPherson's heroic action for the game that he can use once per game. We'll play Scenario 2, End Run, which requires us to start our soldier unit on this edge of the map and exit out of this hex. So we take Private McPherson, who has a regular movement of 4 and a wounded movement of 2, and place him on the map. We're going to be playing veteran level, so we'll be placing 2 Zebs, 2 Revenants, and a single Glorious Dead unit. We'll be using die rolls to place them randomly on the map. When randomly placing undead, you'll roll 2d6 to get your hex column number. In this case, it would be hex column 07, and then roll 2d6 again to establish which hex number in that column. It'll speed things up dramatically if you have an additional set of 2d6 of a different color. With all of our undead placed, we're ready to begin. We begin with the player action phase. Now, each soldier unit can perform 1 action each turn. They can engage, in fact must engage in melee if there is an adjacent undead unit. They can fire their weapon. They can reload one of their weapons. They can move, or a half move and fire, which means they can move up to half their movement allowance and fire at an undead unit with a corresponding negative modifier for their firing action. I don't like the looks of this Revenant here. I'm going to go ahead and fire my rifle at him. I'll begin by flipping my rifle marker to its reload side. And then I'll roll 2d6 on the combat chart to determine the combat result. We'll say I rolled a 9. That Revenant will now be wounded and stunned. With that wounded Revenant now wounded and stunned, I'll place a wounded marker underneath him and he's stunned. So I'll take one of these purple halos and place it on top of his marker. Having exhausted my one action for the turn, it's now the Undead's turn to move. So, in order, you take actions for the Zebs, then the Revenants, then the Glorious Dead. And you will move them in order of priority. If they're adjacent, they will always attempt to perform a grapple attack on a Union soldier. If they are not adjacent, they will move toward the nearest Union soldier. And in the case of the Glorious Dead, if they are in firing range, they will always attempt to fire at a Union soldier or reload the weapon if it's already been fired on the previous turn. If a Glorious Dead cannot fire because they are wounded, then they will move toward the nearest Union soldier. First, we'll attempt to move our Zebs closer to the Union soldier. So we moved this Zeb. This Zeb was unable to move toward the Union soldier because of the tree and because of the Revenant blocking his move. Next, we'll move our Revenants. He will move his printed movement allowance 2 spaces toward the Union soldier. This Revenant is stunned. He can do nothing. Now it's the Glorious Dead's turn to take its step. Normally, it would fire at the Union soldier if it's within range. However, we are more than 7 hexes distant from the Glorious Dead. So instead, he'll use his 3 movement allowance points to move toward our Union soldier. 1, 2, 3. Whoops. It's now the Confederate housekeeping phase. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and remove the purple stunned marker from our Revenant unit. Next we'll move on again to the Union players phase. It's now the beginning of a new turn. Let's go ahead and move Private McPherson towards the safety of that wall over there. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, if we had wanted, we could have remained in that hex and instead used our action to reload the rifle. But we decided to move instead. It's the Undead's turn. So let's start again by moving first our Zebs, then our Revenants, and now we'll do the Glorious Dead phase. Now, this time, we're in range of that Glorious Dead's rifle fire. Roll 2d6 on the Glorious Dead fire combat chart and determine the results. Depending on the results of the Glorious Dead's fire, your soldier unit may suffer no ill effects, or he may have to take a wound, or, in addition to taking a wound, he may be pinned, in which case you would place one of these green halos on him. When a soldier unit is pinned, all he can do is fire, reload, but cannot move. The green pinned marker would be removed on the next Union housekeeping phase. If a soldier unit takes 2 wounds, he is killed. If a soldier unit takes a wound, he would now be reduced to the wounded movement allowance on his marker. Having fired his weapon, take one of the black halos and place it on top of the Glorious Dead unit to indicate that on its next turn it must reload before it can fire its weapon again. So those are the basics. Let's have a look at a few special things here. We'll start with these event cards. Let's say I had rolled a doubles on that undead fire attack against my soldier. I would draw one of these event cards at random, and what they do is you'll have to resolve some of them immediately. Usually it's a bad thing. Place an additional Zeb unit near your soldier. If your rifle is loaded and ready to fire, it would flip it to the reload side. Here's a zombie, would heal a wound. Some of them here, the zombies would take an additional movement toward you. Some of them are good for you. You can retain some of them. For example, this would be a modifier to a combat roll. Here's a victory point bonus. This would cancel an undead melee attack. All of those special symbols you can look up on your player aid to see what they mean. Those event cards are only used on a doubles roll during combat. If at any time you end up adjacent to an undead unit, either as a result of an undead movement or your own movement, the undead unit would immediately perform a grapple attack against you. And you could be wounded, you could have no effect, or you could be grappled. Now what happens when you are grappled is on your next turn, you may only conduct a melee action to try and break the grapple. This is when the undead will usually, finish you off and turn you into zombie chow. Remember that heroic action we talked about earlier? Well, this would be a case, for example, to use your headshot heroic action. Heroic actions can be used at any time, either during your turn, or perhaps if there's another player in the game or another soldier unit in use during that unit's turn, or during the undead turn. Now, we've got a Zeb unit adjacent to our guy, so we can go ahead and play our heroic action and destroy that unit and use up an ammo on our pistol. But we can only use that heroic action once per game, and then it's gone. Let's say we're playing with more than one soldier unit, and Private McPherson ends up getting killed by an undead grapple attack. That's where the turning track comes into play. Remove Private McPherson's marker from the map. Take the ammo marker off of his player card, flip it to the RIP side, and place it on the starting point of the turning track. Each successive turn, that RIP marker moves down, and then you have to take a turning roll. What you want to do is roll this number or less for there to be no effect. If you roll more than the current turning number, you would place at random a new Revenant unit somewhere on the board. If that RIP marker makes it all the way down to the 1 spot, no turning roll is required. You automatically place the new Revenant unit. That's going to be it for Nuts and Bolts for today, folks. Thank you for joining me. Until next time, happy gaming.